Is this a long intro or does it start right away?
Oh, they're gonna start singing.
Here I come to
Okay, here we go.
find myself, catch the tide, looking for a piece at the end of the.
Wait, this is a group, right? There's
Yeah.
multiple. There's multiple.
I
Okay.
can't help myself.
Take a little bit of forward.
I'm so afraid I lose
So this is EDM, right? EDM.
Yeah, EDM, trance. I guess it depends on how you classify it.
Okay,
I really like her voice.
Yeah, it's a very soothing. I feel this is study music, low key. If the thing doesn't go toops toops, you know. Okay. Great. So that song is called "Home" by Above and Beyond. If you want to go ahead and check that out. But we have a very special guest for today's episode. There's some my drops here. We have Micheal Wong in the building. How are you doing, Micheal?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good. Thank you. And Rebecca, how are you doing today?
Good. Thanks for asking, Ali. How are you doing today?
I'm great. Thank you. Micheal, thank you so much for joining us. We're excited to have you. We know it's a bit busy now, so we really appreciate you stopping by.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
Yes, of course.
So introduce a little bit about yourself, what courses you teach, who you are.
Do you want the short version or the long version?
Long version.
Okay. So maybe I'll kind of talk about how I got involved with BHSc. And so I joined BHSc. It's going to date me a little bit. So 2013, fall 2013 was when I first joined BHSc. And the first course I taught was actually a course that's no longer around, sadly, psychobiology, which I think if you were in third or fourth year, you would have taken.
Cups that are rose. Yeah, just had to sneak that in there. My bad. Sorry, continue. Rest in peace, psychobio.
Yeah, rest in peace. So that was sort of my first exposure to BHSc, and I taught psychobiology, which is a lecture-based course that examines the physiological mechanisms that underlie behavioral psychology. But I won't go into too much detail into all the different courses I've taught over the years. But that was my first exposure to BHSc, and I've been part of the program. And then I taught for the program for 5 years after that, and I was involved in pretty much all aspects of its curriculum. So I was part of the first year curriculum group facilitating first year inquiry, part of the child health specialization. But after 5 years, I decided to look for opportunities elsewhere for a number of different reasons, one of which was because I did both my undergrad and my PhD at McMaster. And so I wanted a bit of a change in scenery. So that led me to move. So I ended up getting a position in the University of Wisconsin in the United States. And I was there for about 2 years. And after that, I came back to Canada because I missed Canada for a number of different reasons. And I was an education consultant for a year. Actually, I started and that was only last year, 10 days before the pandemic. So I was an education consultant at Conestoga College in Kitchener, where I essentially consulted with faculty and upper administration about best teaching practices. And I helped transition a college to remote learning during COVID-19. But actually, so towards the end of last year, I was really missing being in the classroom and with students. And so an opportunity presented itself, and I found myself back here in McMaster and with BHSc. And I have to say that I couldn't be happier. So I'm so happy to be back, not only just in Canada, but also back with the BHSc community, where it's probably one of the only jobs I felt like I belonged, and I felt, it was sort of a home for me.
Wow, I can't believe you betrayed Canada and went to the US for 2 years.
I think, I don't know, I feel as I'll speak for myself. I feel growing up in Canada, I've always sort of romanticized the US. And maybe
Right,
that's,
right,
I don't know, from the media, maybe because, they have access to all the great Amazon things. And
right.
That, oh my gosh, true.
there's just
Even
some,
though, yes, sir,
go
go
ahead.
ahead.
Go ahead, Ali.
No, I was gonna say, even though we live like right beside each other, our cultures are like kind of similar. Like we speak the same language, we have similar interests. They're completely different, like worlds. Like the day-to-day interactions are completely different. And I haven't even lived in the US. I just go there sometimes to visit my dad who works there. So it's like I totally get it. Like I can understand how different it could be. Um,
Can I ask, where's your dad located?
yeah, my dad is in Mississippi.
Okay.
Yeah. So a little bit in the south. And even this is the thing, Rebecca, I'm telling you, and Michael knows this by now, but like depending on where you are, like there's a north, there's a west, there's a east, there's a south, like there's different places within America that are completely different. Do you know what I mean?
Mhm.
So people interact with each other differently. Whereas in Canada, I feel like, yeah, every city is different, but it's a lot of the same things that goes on. At least maybe it's because we've been in Ontario most. Maybe that's why. I don't know. I haven't been to British Columbia, but yeah, that's how I feel. I feel like there's way more diversity over there too.
I was just going to say something I noticed when I was in Wisconsin is how much the states differ from each other, and I think maybe
Mhm.
what kind of contributes to that is the states were a lot smaller, right? So if you
Yeah,
look at the size of Ontario versus the size of most states in the U.S., I think you can fit 5 or 6 or maybe even more states in Ontario
yeah,
geographically,
yeah. And
and so
most of our populations here too.
yeah, yeah. And so what was interesting is that I was on the border of Wisconsin and Minnesota, and the Minnesotans were in many ways very different from the Wisconsinites, and which were very different from people in Illinois.
Give us specific examples.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I want to go into politics right now. Um, Maybe I won't go into politics. I felt I noticed the individuals I interacted with in Minnesota were more vocal and they were more sort of outspoken. And people in Wisconsin, to me at least, my experience, it felt they were more reserved. And so it was really interesting because I was on the border. Sometimes when I met someone, I would kind of play a game in my head where I would guess, are they from Minnesota or are they from Wisconsin? Um, and I would say I was right like 70-80% of the time.
That's crazy.
Wow.
That's crazy too.
So going to the US, you probably had a lot of, thoughts uh, that you've had about living in the US. Were they true? Were they false? What was your favorite parts of living over there and your least favorite parts?
I'll start with my favorite first. It was I think in some ways, in many ways, it was fun to be like the token Canadian there. So it was of course I met a lot of individuals there, but something that kind of opened my eyes was that we're so in tune to American culture, but and we know so much about their political system and about their culture in general, but it often wasn't reciprocated. So when I met people in Wisconsin, there were very few of them who had any concept of Canada. Um, so it was interesting that they, so for example, and maybe because they are a superpower, right? So and I think that has something to do with it, where I was asked who our president was or how many states there are in Canada. So that was really interesting to me. And then when I said Ontario, um, some people knew, of course, but many people didn't know that it was a province. And they would assume it maybe was a city or a certain region. And so when I said it's a province where Toronto is located, everyone knows Toronto.
Yeah, I was gonna say they definitely know Toronto, and
Yeah.
Funny.
So yeah, so that was kind of fun to in compare and making differences, talking about differences between the U.S. and Canada. was also really fun. When I was teaching some courses, some of the students that I worked with or that I was teaching didn't understand some of my Canadian slang, which I didn't even know were slang at the time. So I'll tell you a story where I had a student who was asking, I won't go into the specifics of the question, but this one particular student asked me a question and I made a comparison. I said, oh, it's kind of like your toque. And he looked at me with this puzzled look. And then I looked at the entire class and I could tell no one knew what I was talking about. And then so I said to him, I said, I looked at the entire class, I said, you don't know what a toque is, do you?
It's a very Canadian thing, yeah.
Yeah, I didn't know that. For some reason, I thought it was a general term that was given to like a beanie or a hat. Yeah. So I had to explain to them that it's, you know, what they call a beanie or a hat.
Yeah, they are oblivious to our culture, by the way, Rebecca. Mike was completely right. They're like super oblivious to what's going on. They barely know anything about, like, we know so much more about them than they know about us.
It's because global news is always like American news.
Yeah, it was very interesting. And of course, you know, this is a generalization because I did meet some individuals who knew a little bit about Canada. The other interesting thing was when I had a lot of questions about our healthcare system.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And, you know, people would ask me, so can you, you know, what is it like to have, you know, healthcare in Canada? And so without naming people or specifics, I had met individuals who had over $100,000 in debt because of health-related reasons. And I even had a colleague, for example, so he joined at roughly the same time I did. And what was really interesting to hear, and I guess I didn't think about this as a Canadian, is he had sprained his ankle, but he was worried that it was actually broken. But he refused to see a physician because of how much it would cost him. And so he was basically hoping it would heal on its own, and it wasn't healing and he was in pain. And so when I first met him, he was limping and essentially on crutches. But as soon as he got hired and health insurance kicked in, then he finally got it taken care of. But that was something, you know, as a Canadian, I feel like we would just go see a doctor and get that treated. So it was sort of an eye-opener for me.
Yeah. How much would a broken ankle cost in the States?
I don't know the cost. I don't know. My only experience with the healthcare system was I saw a general practitioner or family doctor there, and it cost me. I had health insurance, so most of it was reimbursed, but it was $350, I think, $400 for about just under an hour.
That's expensive.
Yeah, and imagine you won't even go do checkups. You only go to the doctor if something severe happens.
Yeah.
Just because you don't want to be paying those. Yeah, and we don't even think about it. Michael's completely right. That's crazy. The whole system is completely different, I feel like. Like they profit off of a lot of different things than like the Canadian government, for example, does. And stuff like that.
Do they have both private and public hospitals? Or only...
We did this in health policy, remember?
I know. I remember this. I forgot. Okay.
We should be knowing this.
I know.
I feel like bad students right now. Wait, Michael, I was gonna ask you, what's Americans' reaction when you tell them you're from Canada and you're born and raised in Canada? Did they say do they think?
Wait, before that, can they tell that you're Canadian just by your accent?
That's a good question. Most people, I don't think Canada is on most people's mind. So when I started teaching or when I started talking, people didn't know where I came from. I asked actually a few students that I was really close with. I said, did you know from the way I was talking that I might have been not from the US? So the one thing I think about the US, and I think there's some of this in Canada too, but there are a lot more regional differences in a lot more in terms of Western accents. There are a lot more of that in the US than in Canada, I feel.
Yeah.
Even within the Midwest where I was, there was a very Wisconsin accent and a very Minnesotan accent. And you can also tell from the slang that they use. So for example, in Wisconsin, they call some people would call a water fountain a bubbler. And I thought it was a soda stream the first time I heard that.
What does that mean? Bubbling?
It means water fountain.
Oh, water fountain. Whoa, that's so different.
Yeah.
How did they come up with that term?
I think there was a company in Wisconsin, from my understanding, from what I've been told. I didn't do my research into this, but there used to be, I think, a company that made water fountains that was something that was called, the name sounded like Bubbler or something. But yeah, most people wouldn't assume I was Canadian. I got, some people thought I was actually from Chicago. They said I have an accent that reminds them of a larger city. So Chicago, I got. Minneapolis, I got a few times because I was pretty close to Minneapolis. Reaction was, whenever they heard, then they started hearing my accent. So the way I've pronounced words have shifted almost entirely, I feel, since I've moved to the US. So I'll give you some examples. The first time one of my colleagues called me out, putting this in air quotes, we joke about accents. So I apologized to her and I said, sorry, in a very Canadian way. And so she just made fun of me that one day. She's like, oh, I'm so sorry. And so I no longer say sorry because of that. And now I pronounce it sorry. Or tomorrow, I used to say sorry about tomorrow. But I don't do that anymore. And I feel because, I spent time there and, the Canadian accent was mocked by every American that I met. I feel my pronunciation of some words have shifted. So I would say, for example, about now instead of about.
A boot.
Or a boot.
Yeah.
So would you say in general, going to the US and living there for a couple of years, has it kind of shifted your mindset a little bit, how you think about certain things? Even like the teaching experience, like did it open your eyes into like, okay, the students here are different in this way, or students here are different that way, and just how everything is run? Did it kind of shift how you used to think?
Oh yeah, I think definitely. So I spent pretty much, aside from traveling, I've done quite a bit of traveling, but I haven't really lived anywhere else before, aside from, Southern Ontario. So I was born and raised in Brantford, which is only 30 minutes from Hamilton. So, most of my life was in this area. And even though I traveled, I think maybe the exposure wasn't long enough. I didn't interact with enough people that I was able to see, of course I learn things each time I travel, but just being immersed in a place for 2 years that I think shifted my thinking and gave me a lot of perspective about myself and about the world. I'll talk about the education system first. And what was really interesting, and this is something I learned while working and teaching in Wisconsin, is, and I think this is probably true even for a lot of Canadian schools as well, it's very didactic. So it was predominantly lecture-based, a lot of multiple choice questions. And so some of the assessments that I would typically use in BHSc, some of my colleagues, for example, thought it was too out there, for lack of a better word. And so, which was to me really interesting, because they were worried that the students would not be receptive to a new way of learning or a new way of being assessed. And so I essentially took psychobiology and I transitioned it to a fourth-year course called cognitive neuroscience. And I remember the reaction of one of my colleagues and said, "You don't have final exams?" And it was really interesting because to me, that's second nature. I haven't given them a multiple choice final exam in so long. So I just kind of naturally took that with me. But it wasn't well received by a lot of my colleagues. My teaching philosophy, inquiry-based learning, problem-based learning, wasn't very well received by my colleagues. And I was questioned a lot about why I was teaching the way I was teaching. But what was really interesting was the students loved it. So I was doubting my own teaching for a good half of the semester. I would say I wasn't really comfortable with my teaching style until November, because so many people in the university were teaching very didactically, very traditionally. And so when the student reception came back very positive, and the students, even in some of my comments, for example, students would say, this is the first time I've never had to write in a class, never had to write a final exam, and how refreshing it was to actually be challenged to come up with something. So one of the projects I had them do was to generate a new type of neurotechnology. So take what they've learned and to pitch a new idea. And it was a project that the students really liked. And so because of that positive feedback from the students, then it caused a shift in a lot of my colleagues in questioning some of their pedagogical techniques.
For sure. I think hasn't there been a lot of research saying that these large group lectures, they don't facilitate learning for students in the best way as well? And that like deeper learning where you actually apply what you do actually helps you learn better for the students. Is that a reason why you like this way of assessing better as well?
Yeah, for sure. And I think something that I've also noticed is when the students that I worked with in fourth year, when they became receptive to the idea, it was so amazing to see their ability to critically think and their ability to generate new ideas. But they were so resistant in the beginning because it was something that they weren't used to. But I think about, the comparison to you, as students in the BHSc program, third and fourth year students, how you're presented with a problem and it's almost second nature. You don't ask for a lot of information, and you go out, you explore, you find information, you develop your own research question, and you do the project. Whereas I felt I had to do a lot of scaffolding, even in fourth year for my students in Wisconsin. But by providing that scaffold, right, helping them along the way, and when it got time for them to actually do the project and I give them some feedback, they learn to love the ability to direct their own learning and the ability to not be told what to do and to come up with their own ideas. So something I learned moving there is how much, even though I valued it at the time when I was part of BHSc, but how much more I value it now, the problem-based learning and the inquiry-based learning. And I have molded it, and I'm a firm believer of student-directed learning and inquiry.
Yeah, and I don't know if I'm speaking for all the students, but I know a lot of the students that are my friends that are in the BHSc program, they like comparing electives that they take or whatever. Like, we understand better if we don't have to just memorize, recall. It's a little bit better embedded in our mind because we utilize it. We utilize whatever information we're given, and then we have to like think about it, and then we have to apply it to a certain situation rather than who can remember the best. A lot of the information that I've retained is from courses like psychobio is one of them, cell bio is one of them, all the
biochem inquiry.
Yeah, those are all the things that I completely remember. And guess what? The ones that I don't remember were like the language classes that I took that I had to like recall certain things, or what was the other one? Some of the biology courses that are not in BHSc that I just had to recall information, or chemistry. I don't really remember a lot of the things. And I think that is because of the teaching style.
And it's also like the projects that we do, they're all like personal to us. So obviously we remember them better than just slides on a content.
Yeah.
I really appreciate problem-based learning as well.
Yeah. Would you be willing to go through an experience like that again, where you go to a completely new place and try teaching there for a bit, and then maybe coming back, maybe staying there, who knows? But would you be open to doing that again after going to the US?
I think something else I learned about myself is how much I took Southern Ontario for granted. I used to think that I'm so interested in living abroad for a little bit.
Right.
I think something I've learned is I think Southern Ontario is a very special place, which I don't think I gave it enough credit when I left. So if I were to go somewhere else, I think I would be very calculated in where I go.
Okay, fair
Um,
enough.
I think in Southern Ontario, something I didn't realize was how many large cities there are in Southern Ontario, right? So if we look at, Hamilton is what, 600,000, Toronto is
Mhm.
like 1 point something million.
Yeah, over 1 million. Yeah.
Yeah, like Mississauga, like almost a million or maybe even a million. But all these cities that are actually quite large. And in the Midwest, I think the city I was in, La Crosse, was the fourth largest city in the state. And that was just behind Milwaukee and Madison and maybe Green Bay. But the population was around 75,000. Milwaukee, which is their largest city, is the size of Hamilton, so about 600,000. And then even when you look at Minnesota, I think Minneapolis is the size of Mississauga. And then Rochester, which I think was their second or third largest city, is a population of about 100,000. So there are a lot of rural areas in between. And I like to call myself a city person. So to me, there wasn't a lot to do. At least I'm sure other people have, based on your interest would. I missed, restaurants, and I missed going to a show, a play, a sports event. I'm also not a football fan, so I'm a Raptors fan, but I'm not a Green Bay Packers fan.
That's pretty sound effect. Raptors, yeah. Didn't
Yeah.
Raptors play the Milwaukee in the year they won?
Yeah, I was actually. It's funny. I was at the Y there, and there the game actually. I don't know if both of you watch basketball.
Yeah, I think every Canadian was watching that season. After they got into like the semifinals, we were like, "Oh, yeah, it's happening." Well, you should have been there. If you're a basketball fan, as you said, you're a Raptors fan. It was packed, Michael. I'm telling you, every game, the Mississauga Square, the Toronto Square,
Yeah.
there'll be so many people. But you
I
watched it from the other side.
Actually, sorry, I shouldn't state. So I was in Wisconsin when they were playing the Bucks. So when the Raptors were playing the Bucks,
Right.
and there was one game in particular where the Bucks were leading. I forgot by how many points, but the Bucks were leading, and I'm pretty sure I was the only Canadian there. And so I was at the Y or the gym, and this guy walks up to me and said, "Oh, we're winning, eh?" Or he didn't say "eh." He said, I forgot exactly what he said. He's like, "Oh, good game, or we're winning," and see, that's where my Canadian came out. I had a Maple Leaf. I have a Maple Leaf keychain on my set of keys, and I slowly tucked it in my pocket because I was afraid of what he would find out.
Yeah.
But I was like, "Yeah, great game." But what happened was in that same game, the Raptors caught up and they actually beat the Bucks, and so everyone in the facility was so disappointed, and I'm cheering to myself inside because I didn't want to reveal to them that I wasn't a Bucks fan.
Yeah, you don't want to reveal you were the imposter in the crowd.
God,
Exactly.
imposter.
That's
Um,
crazy.
But yeah, I actually watched the final game in Hamilton at
Okay,
First
that's
Ontario
cool.
Center. So that was a lot of fun.
Okay. So moving to a more serious topic in the United States. So on Tuesday, I'm sure a lot of you have heard that there was a shooting in Atlanta, Georgia, and 8 people were killed, and then 6 of them were Asian women. So Mike Wong, you're Asian. Which country are you from, by the way?
You mean ethnically?
Yeah.
So ethnically, I'm Chinese.
Okay. Yeah, me too. So I just wanted to get your opinion on what's happening right now over there.
I don't think I don't think I'm going to call it just a U.S. problem because I think there are also increases in anti-Asian hate crime that has also increased, unfortunately, in Canada as well, and maybe even other parts of the world. I haven't followed too much in other parts of the world. But this is something that actually resonates with me a lot because I experienced a lot of discrimination and racism actually when I was in Wisconsin, which actually led me to eventually leave. So what happened in Atlanta, it really bothered me and it really upset me. And it was that night, actually, I think I was scrolling through TikTok and there was just so much, right? So many people, so many TikTokers, I think they're called, or creators,
Yeah.
were talking about it. And it was really nice to hear, Asian Canadians, Asian Americans speaking out against what happened. And I think it wasn't labeled a hate crime yet, is my understanding. Um, and but it's also, I think, disheartening to see the rise of anti-Asian hate crime in North America and that it's not talked about. So it's I don't, I haven't seen too much coverage in the news. Most of it is in social media, and some news outlets have talked about it, but it's not publicized. I feel what happened in Atlanta was more public than some of the other incidences that have happened, and I find that so disheartening, especially as an Asian Canadian. But I'm also glad that the Asian community is starting to speak up about, the racism, not just now. I mean, anti-Asian racism has existed even before COVID-19, right? But I feel, and maybe it's a cultural thing, this is something I've been thinking a lot about lately, is why anti-Asian racism isn't really talked about. And I wonder if it's because many Asians, and perhaps for cultural reasons, don't report it and don't talk about it. So therefore, there is a misrepresentation or a misunderstanding that it's not very severe, right? But I think I can probably speak. I think I can say this pretty safely that and I'm saying Asian in general, right? So the Eastern Hemisphere. I think most of us have probably experienced some form of racism in our lifetime, being born and or raised or spent time even in Canada, right? Not just the United States. I sometimes call it the perpetual foreigner syndrome, where you're constantly asked, where are you from? Where are you really from? What is your, I'll sell my name as Mike or Michael. And I've been asked, what's your real name? Like, well, Michael. So I laugh at it because I think, I don't know, at this point, like, what else can I do? But I know that I've been definitely speaking out more about my experiences. And I think, and definitely talking more about anti-Asian racism is something that, I'm doing more of. And so long story short, I'm really glad that the Asian community is starting to speak up more about the discrimination that we have faced.
Mm-hmm. So if you're comfortable, would you be willing to share exactly what incidents happened in Wisconsin that led you to leave?
I'll share a little bit. I've been called racial slurs more times in probably the 2 years I was there than I would say most of my adult life here in Canada. I was, when I was younger in elementary school, that was thrown around quite a bit. But as an adult, I can't remember the last time that it happened in Canada. But that happened a few times in the United States. And there were a lot of microaggressions, people staring all the time. Every time I would walk somewhere, a bazillion eyes would be on me. There were a couple of few instances where I was essentially refused service at a restaurant. So it wasn't explicit, but what happened was, for instance, there was one time where I went to a restaurant with two of my colleagues, both of whom are also people of color, and we were told that there would be a long wait for a seat, and that we would have to wait a long time. And they said, oh, our seats are all packed, but you look in the back and there were 5 empty seats at the back. So I don't know why we decided to eat there, but we asked how long's the wait, and they said 45 minutes. After 45 minutes, we went for a walk. After 45 minutes, we didn't receive a call. And when we went back, they said, oh, we tried calling you multiple times, but no one picked up. We checked our cell reception, nothing. We didn't get a single call. So, and that's happened more times than I'd like. There were times where I sat at a restaurant. This was a restaurant actually directly across from the campus, where I was with my colleagues, all of whom were white. It was a small group, and I was the only one who wasn't given a menu. So those were just some examples.
Yeah, that's definitely really tough to deal with. I'm sorry you had to go through that.
Yeah,
Personally,
100%. Yeah, go for it, Rebecca. I was gonna ask, what would you think?
well, personally, I've been lucky that this has only happened a few times to me. And to be honest, I grew up very, like, I've had the same friends for a very long time. So when I went to university, it was kind of like a lot of people that I didn't know. And then, just remarks here and there, like I was walking down campus and the car rolled down their window, was like, go make me sushi, or like something like that. And this one time I wanted to join a club, and then they told me, sorry, we don't like athletic Asian girls. So I just didn't join the club. But yeah, just stuff like that. What about you, Ali?
Yeah, definitely. I can, first of all, I want to say thank you guys for sharing. I actually think it's important that the more people talk about it, the less it becomes like a subject nobody wants to touch. And that's why I appreciate people sharing it on Instagram and just opening up the discussion. That's like one of the most important steps, because then people get exposed to it. People know what's going on for real. I didn't have a lot of information of a lot of the stuff that was going on. And then you guys also sharing it, I think is very important. So I appreciate that too. Of course, it was a horrible event that happened, but it's good that we're in 2021 where this stuff can't slide anymore. You know what I mean? So people will talk about it. People will want something to happen. People will want action. So I appreciated that a lot. And yeah, man, like as Michael also said, this is not like a USA thing. It happens in Canada too, but sometimes we don't look at it, or we overlook it, because Canada is known as that country that everything is bubbly, everything is good, there's no issues. But it does happen all the time. It's definitely happened to me before. And as someone that just came to the country, I didn't even speak English. Like I could tell when people, will make judgments, or they would do certain things differently with me, or because of this color of my skin. That I also had to go through that, and it's the worst feeling ever. I don't ever want anyone to go through that, because something you can't control. So that's also my thoughts on it. I think more and more people should like speak up about that, because it's very common. It's very common. Before, people didn't talk about it. Now it's being exposed. So I really appreciate you guys also talking about it.
I don't know if you feel the same way, Mike, but I've always kind of been taught to, not speak up about things, just like let it pass and just like focus on my own stuff and focus on my own goals and not care about like what other people say and do. Have you been raised that way as well?
Yeah, this is where I mentioned I think it may be a cultural thing. I've been thinking a lot about this lately. I think part of the reasons why Asians, and I know I'm generalizing, but Asians don't speak up about some of the discrimination that we face, and I wonder if it goes back to some of the cultural, or the cultural practices or cultural pieces, around, for example, around not disrupting the harmony. And I wonder if part of that is because it is a collectivistic culture. And I've had some great conversations with a colleague of mine in the United States who does some work in multicultural psychology. And he has a hypothesis, which I've been thinking a lot about, is this idea of being a guest. And I don't know if this is true for all collectivistic societies, but at least in Chinese culture, and I think in a lot of East Asian cultures, there's this idea where we have to be polite when we're in someone's home, right? So, for example, we don't ask for things, even if you're thirsty, for example, and the host asks you, "Do you want water?" No, I'm fine, even if you really want it. And so I wonder, part of it, and this is his theory, and I've been kind of thinking a lot about this, is I wonder if being in North America, and maybe, the being perpetually also labeled as a foreigner, I wonder if that has an impact on us, where we always feel we're indebted to people in North America. And so therefore we don't speak up because we're sort of the guest here, and, and we don't want to get in your way. We don't want to make you uncomfortable.
Wow, that's a very interesting thing. That, like, I hadn't even thought about it like that, but that definitely resonates with me as well.
Yeah, I've never thought about it that way as well, and I can also see how it works, because I totally understand the thing where, if you go into someone's home, you don't ask for anything, you stay quiet, you agree with everything that they say. If they offer you something, no, thank you, I don't want it.
Even if you want it.
Yeah, even if you want it. Even like when you're going to a restaurant, it's like, "Oh, I'll pay. No, I'll pay." And then after you like sneak in the back and pay with your credit card. It's always like trying to be humble and trying to be like the perfect guest.
Yeah. And even thinking about, when you mentioned being humble, I'm very uncomfortable by compliments. I don't know how to react when someone compliments me.
No, I also feel that. that's also me.
Yeah, for sure.
So something I learned, I think, is that I didn't realize how much, even though, of course I'm Asian and I'm Chinese, I didn't understand how much my culture has impacted the way that I behave.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is where I've been interested in sort of intercultural communication in the last couple of years. Is I don't know necessarily if being Asian in a North American society is actually very beneficial, if that makes sense, because there's a cultural clash in many ways, even though we may not be aware of it.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
So yeah, do you wanna introduce your new segment that you have here? Spill the tea. This is you. I am not introducing this segment.
We can cut out this segment if you want. But
I'm curious now.
No, it'll be a quick segment, but I want Rebecca to talk about it because.
Welcome to our new segment called "Spill the Tea" with Micheal Wong.
He has no idea what we're about to ask
I
him.
have no idea.
It's gonna be so uncomfortable for him, but go for it, Rebecca.
So, you know how in high school we had the popular kids, the cliques, the drama kids? So I just wanted to know, does that exist in the BHSc staff?
Oh, I don't know if I can answer that question.
I can't wait to hear
We
your answer,
already
Micheal.
know the answer.
The audience, I'm rubbing my hands right now. I just want to know what is the answer to this one. I already have some ideas. I want to know
It's
the
a yes
truth.
or no question.
I think it's a question I won't answer. I'm going to stay silent.
Okay, fine. Would you consider yourself in the popular group?
I also won't answer that question.
Michael is just breezing through these questions.
Wow, it's okay. We all know the answers to all of them. So, okay, which cohort is the best cohort?
Wow, you're going to make me answer that question.
Yeah.
I don't know this. Like, I don't know your cohort, and I don't know the sec. I don't.
2022.
I've only met a few individuals in your cohort and the second cohort. I don't know. I don't want to pick favorites.
Okay.
But what I will say is I know the most people in the fourth year cohort, and I know quite a few in the first year cohort. I feel because when I went to Wisconsin, I missed out on your cohort, and well, not really missed out because here we are.
You know what? Quality over quantity. Ali and I over all. Okay.
Yeah, we represent all of third years.
For sure. Okay. Not like cohort specifically, but who do you like to teach the best? Like freshmen or seniors or sophomores? Like who do you like to teach the best? Who's the most interesting?
I think they all have their uniqueness to them.
Mm-hmm.
I think first year students are one of my favorite courses to teach was psychobiology. And I used to have so much fun with that class. And I think for a number of different reasons. I think it's one of the only classes where everyone is together. Right? It's a large lecture-based course and everyone, like the entire cohort is there. And because it's so big and I guess the fourth year students will know this the best because they've had me, is I make really bad dad jokes like all the time. And there's just something about having a lot of people in the room laughing at a really bad joke, and it's so contagious. So I used to do a lot of really embarrassing Pokemon references that I try to slip in some other classes I do, but it's not as much of an opportunity. So because of that, I really enjoyed teaching first year because I think it's also the beginning of their journey. And I think it's such a privilege to be part of, their transition from high school to university. But I think every year has their sort of own nuances and it's fun in a different way. So the one thing I really enjoyed about teaching in the child health specialization is I get to see some students for 4 years, right? So if I had them in my first year inquiry class, right, and even if I don't, I see them in second year, but I see sort of the growth that they have over the 4 years, and it's so amazing. And again, I call this a privilege, is by the time students are in their fourth year, you see the students practicing those, the 7 Ps that we talk so much about, right? Whether it's personal awareness or collaboration, and it's so rewarding to see it all come full circle and see students, actually advocating or being aware of group process. So I don't know. I can't pick a favorite year because it's all part of the journey. And I think there's something rewarding to be said about each year.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm really so grateful to be back before the fourth year cohort graduates, because, I worked with them when they were just entering university. I hadn't seen them for 2 years, and now I get to be part, of their final year. And some of them I get to work very closely with. And so it's been so amazing to see, their growth and their transformation over the 4 years. And it's something I'm so honored to be a part of.
Wow. So in conclusion, he likes first years the best.
I like everyone.
Yeah. No favorites.
No favorites, but first year.
Wait, and also Michael, can we do something about psychobio? That course needs to come back somehow. Like
somehow.
Yeah, the
Working
same course. I don't know. I think you have the power, Michael. You can,
working
make
on
a little
it.
phone call and just be like.
It's definitely a topic that I want to, in some capacity, bring back. I don't know what that's going to look like yet. And yeah, we'll see what that looks like. But I'm very, very interested in doing something with psychobiology. It's a course I really miss, and it is my favorite course, one of my favorite courses to teach. And then I brought it to Wisconsin, and I love that stuff.
Great. Okay, so we've kept you here long enough. That's gonna be the end of our episode. Do you have any last remarks?
I'm terrible with last remarks. But no, thank you both very much for inviting me here.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for coming. I think the conversation was really good. I really enjoyed listening to you talk, and Rebecca also, and also your experiences in the US. So yeah, I really, really appreciate you. Round of applause for Michael. And yeah, with that being said, happy Monday, everyone. And we'll see you guys next week. Take care.